You're sitting across from someone very old. Their hands shake when they lift the teacup. The afternoon light makes dust visible in the air between you. They're telling you about their childhood, about a city that doesn't exist anymore, about buildings that were torn down before you were born. And then they stop, they look at you, and they say, "There's something I need to tell you before I die. Something about what things really were, about what we really had. Forget everything you think you know about history ending cleanly, about the last of ancient things dying centuries ago, buried in textbooks, safe in the past." Because in 1952, in a small apartment in Omsk, an old man told his grandson the truth. And then he died, and the truth died with him, except the grandson wrote it down. This is what he wrote. "I found the notebook in 2019, an estate sale in Montreal. The seller's grandmother had immigrated from Russia in 1956. 4 years after the man in the story died. The notebook was in a box of documents, Soviet travel papers, photographs of people whose names no one remembered anymore, letters and languages. The family couldn't read. The estate sale was in a basement apartment in Mile End. November rain drummed against the windows. The seller was a woman in her 60s who spoke French with an accent that had been worn down by decades in Montreal, but still carried something else underneath, something Eastern European, something old. She didn't want to talk about the box. She said her grandmother never talked about Russia, never talked about what she left behind. Just worked, raised children, died quietly in 1989 without ever returning. The box had been in the grandmother's closet for 33 years. The granddaughter had never opened it until preparing for the estate sale. The notebook was small, brown leather, cracked at the spine like dried earth. The leather was soft, worn by hands, warmed by pockets. Someone had carried this, had held it close. Inside, the handwriting was Russian Cyrillic, dated entries spanning 1951 to 1953. The first 20 pages were ordinary: grocery lists, weather observations, complaints about neighbors, reminders about work shifts. The handwriting was neat, controlled. The observations mundane. But 30 pages in, everything changed. The handwriting became urgent. Dense paragraphs with no breaks. Words crowded against each other as if the writer was racing against something, against time, maybe against forgetting, against death. The ink changed too, became darker, as if pressed harder into the paper, as if each word was being carved rather than written. The first entry in this new style was dated November 12, 1952. "Grandfather is dying. The doctors say maybe 2 days, maybe 3. He can barely speak, but today he called me close. He grabbed my hand, his grip still strong despite everything, and he said, 'Get paper, get a pen. I have to tell you something before I go. Something true, something they erased.' The grandfather's name was Anatoly Mikhailovich Volkov. Born 1871 in Omsk, he would have been 81 when he died. The notebook doesn't say what killed him, just that he was dying. What it does say, across the next 47 pages written in 3 days, is something else entirely. According to the grandson's transcription, Anatoly claimed to remember Omsk before the fires, before what he called the cleansing. He said that when he was a boy in the 1880s, the city looked nothing like it does now. The buildings were different, not different in style, different in origin. He says the old quarter, where the fortress used to be, had structures that were already ancient when he was young. Buildings with foundations that went down 30 meters. Buildings with archways buried underground. Windows below street level that looked into rooms filled with machinery. Nobody understood anymore. He says his father took him into one of these buildings once, through a basement entrance. The room they entered was perfectly geometric, he said. Perfect. The angles were exactly 90 degrees. The walls were smooth stone, not brick, not wood. One solid piece, and in the center of the room was a column, also one piece, also perfect, that went up through the ceiling and down through the floor. The column hummed. The notebook describes this in detail. The column was approximately 2 meters in diameter. It was made of something that looked like marble but wasn't marble. It was warm to the touch, and when you stood close to it, Anatoly claimed, you felt different, lighter, more awake. His father wouldn't let him touch it. His father told him the column had been there since before anyone could remember, that there were others like it throughout the city, that they used to serve a purpose, but that purpose had been forgotten. The Soviets, according to the notebook, destroyed these structures in 1920, not damaged, destroyed. Systematically, the entry dated November 13, 1952 describes the destruction in fragments, as if Anatoly was struggling to remember or struggling to speak. He says it happened fast. Teams came in with sledgehammers and explosives. They worked at night. By morning, buildings that had stood for unknown centuries were rubble. The columns were broken apart and removed, taken somewhere. He doesn't know where. When he asked his father what was happening, his father said, "They're erasing what came before, making room for what comes next." I had the notebook translated by a professor of Russian history at McGill University in early 2020. She was skeptical at first, said it sounded like fantasy, like the kind of story someone makes up in old age. But then she noticed something in the handwriting analysis, the way certain letters were formed, the pressure points in the Cyrillic characters. She said the writing was consistent with someone educated in late imperial Russia, someone who learned to write before the Soviet orthographic reforms of 1918. Whoever wrote this notebook learned to write in Tsarist Russia. The dates checked out. I asked her about Omsk in 1920, about the Soviet period, about whether there were records of demolitions, of systematic destruction of old architecture. She said yes. She said that between 1920 and 1925, the Soviet government engaged in what they called rationalization of urban space across multiple Siberian cities. Official records list the demolition of pre-revolutionary structures of unclear origin in Omsk, Tomsk, and Tobolsk, but the records don't say what these structures were, just that they were removed. She showed me a Soviet administrative document from 1922, archived in the Lenin State Library's digital collection. Directive for 7B. It authorized the removal and transport of anomalous architectural elements from Western Siberian urban centers for study and preservation. The document was marked classified until 1991. It was declassified as part of the post-Soviet opening of archives, but it still doesn't say what the anomalous elements were or where they were taken. I found 3 photographs. The first was in the Omsk Regional Museum's archive, dated 1912. It shows a street corner in what the caption identifies as the Old Merchant Quarter. In the background, partially visible behind a wooden house, is a stone structure. The structure has an archway. The archway is massive, at least 10 meters tall, and it's carved from single blocks of stone fitted together without mortar. The photograph is grainy, but even through the grain, you can see the precision. The stones fit so tightly that you can't see seams. The second photograph was in a private collection, listed on an auction site for Russian imperial memorabilia, dated 1907. It shows workers standing in front of what the seller described as an old foundation exposed during street repair work in Omsk. The foundation descends at least 6 meters below street level. The workers are standing on wooden scaffolding, looking down into the excavation. At the bottom of the excavation, you can see what looks like a paved floor, geometric patterns, perfectly square tiles. The third photograph I found in an academic paper from 1998, published in the Journal of Siberian Studies. The paper was about Soviet urban development. It included a footnote about unexplained demolitions in the 1920s. The photograph shows a pile of rubble in Omsk, dated 1921. Among the rubble are fragments of the column Anatoly described, cylindrical pieces of smooth stone. In the photograph, you can see one piece clearly. It has markings carved into it, not Cyrillic, not any alphabet I recognize. The notebook contains a sketch, drawn by the grandson, copied from what Anatoly described. The sketch shows the layout of one of these underground rooms. The room is circular, exactly 40 meters in diameter, according to Anatoly's memory. In the center, the column. Around the perimeter, 12 alcoves, evenly spaced. Each alcove, Anatoly said, once contained something. But by the time he saw the room as a child, the alcoves were empty. His father told him the alcoves used to hold what he called singers, devices that made sound, not music, sound that had function, sound that did things. Anatoly couldn't explain what that meant, and the notebook says his grandson didn't understand either, just wrote it down exactly as spoken. But there's a detail in the notebook that made me stop. Anatoly describes the walls of these underground rooms as having a quality he struggles to name. He says they held light differently, that when you brought a lantern into the room, the light didn't behave normally, it didn't spread evenly. It pooled in corners, avoided certain surfaces, seemed to bend around the column. I contacted a physicist at the University of Toronto who specializes in historical architecture. I described what Anatoly claimed without telling him where the information came from. I asked if there were any known materials or construction techniques that could create the effect Anatoly described. He said no, not with any material available in the 19th century or earlier, but he said the description matched theoretical properties of what's called metamaterial architecture, materials engineered at the molecular level to manipulate electromagnetic waves, including visible light, materials that didn't exist until laboratory experiments in the early 2000s. I asked him if there was any possibility, any chance at all, that someone in the 1880s could have encountered something like this. He said only if they encountered something that wasn't built in the 1880s, something much older, or something not from here. The notebook's final entry is dated November 14, 1952. Grandfather died this morning. Before he went, he opened his eyes one more time. He looked at me and he said, "They called it Tartaria. That's what the old people called it when I was young. They said it was the name of what came before the Tsars, before the Mongols, before anything we have words for. They said the buildings weren't built, they were found. And then they were taken away so we would forget we ever found them." The next page in the notebook is blank, then nothing. Then, 3 pages later, a single line in different handwriting, presumably added years later. I don't know if any of this is true. I only know that he believed it, and that he made me promise to write it down. I've spent 3 years trying to verify this, trying to find evidence that Tartaria, as Anatoly described it, was real. Trying to find records of these buildings, these columns, these underground chambers. What I've found is mostly absence. The absence of records, the absence of explanations, the absence of acknowledgement. But I've also found fragments, a reference in a 1914 engineering survey of Omsk to pre-existing structural anomalies incompatible with known construction methods. A notation in an 1887 merchant's diary, housed in the Hermitage archives, about the old stones beneath the city that nobody talks about. A Soviet geological report from 1935 that mentions unexplained acoustic properties in abandoned subterranean spaces discovered during industrial expansion in western Siberia. And I found other notebooks, not Anatoly's, others from Tobolsk, from Tomsk, from cities along the Irtysh River. Different handwriting, different names, but similar stories. Stories of buildings that came from nowhere. Buildings that were already ruins when Russia was young. Buildings that hummed, that glowed, faintly at night, that made people feel strange when they stood inside them. Buildings that were systematically erased between 1920 and 1940. The woman who sold me the notebook in Montreal never asked what was in it. She said she didn't want to. No. She said her grandmother came to Canada with nothing except that box, and she kept that box locked in her closet for 33 years, and she never once looked inside it, as far as anyone knew. The granddaughter said, "I think she was afraid of it. I think she knew what it contained, and she couldn't bear to read it, but she couldn't bear to destroy it either." I asked the physicist again, months after our first conversation, to humor a thought experiment. If someone did find buildings like Anatoly described, buildings that seemed to manipulate light and sound in impossible ways, buildings with foundations going down 30 meters into solid earth, buildings made of single pieces of shaped stone that we couldn't replicate even now, what would it mean? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "It would mean we don't know our own history. It would mean there was something here, something sophisticated, something we've forgotten entirely. And the question wouldn't be what it was. The question would be why we forgot, or why we were made to forget. In 1952, in Omsk, an old man died. Before he died, he told his grandson about buildings that hummed, about columns that warmed the air, about underground chambers with walls that bent light, about a word, Tartaria, that named something lost. The grandson wrote it down, carried the notebook out of Russia for years later, hidden in his grandmother's belongings. The grandmother never read it, never spoke of it, just kept it locked away for 33 years, until she died, and now it sits on my desk in Montreal. Brown leather, cracked spine, 47 pages of urgent handwriting describing something that, according to every official history, never existed, except there are the photographs, 3 of them, from different sources, different years, showing fragments, a stone archway, too precise to be ancient, a foundation too deep to make sense, rubble containing pieces of something carved with symbols nobody can read, except there are the documents, Soviet directives authorizing the removal of anomalous architectural elements, engineering surveys noting structural anomalies incompatible with known construction methods, geological reports mentioning unexplained acoustic properties in abandoned subterranean spaces. Except there are the other notebooks, other stories, other names, other cities, all telling variations of the same impossible thing, that something was here, that someone built it, or found it, or lived in it, that it was magnificent and strange, and utterly beyond anything we're told existed in this part of the world before the modern era, that it was systematically destroyed, that the memory of it was deliberately erased, and that in 1952, one old man dying in Omsk decided to tell the truth to his grandson before the truth died with him. The truth did die. Anatoly Mikhailovich Volkov took most of it to his grave. His grandson carried the fragment that remained across an ocean and a border, locked it in a closet, and never spoke of it. His grandmother died without opening the notebook. The granddaughter sold it in an estate sale to a stranger who translated it, researched it, and found fragments of corroboration, but not proof, never proof, just fragments, just absence, just the outline of something massive that was removed from history so cleanly that even its echo barely remains. But here's what I know, the notebook is real. The handwriting analysis confirms it was written by someone educated in Tsarist Russia. The photographs exist in archives, visible, verifiable, unexplained. The Soviet documents exist, declassified, available, vague in all the wrong ways. The other stories exist, scattered across private collections and forgotten archives, all describing similar impossibilities in similar language. And somewhere, if Anatoly was right, if his father was right, if any of this is true somewhere, there are pieces, fragments of columns, sections of walls that held light differently, tiles with geometric patterns carved into single stones, devices that made sound that did things, all removed, all transported, all stored somewhere under the classification anomalous architectural elements, waiting in a warehouse nobody talks about, or destroyed entirely, erased so completely that even the fragments became dust. I don't know which one is true. I don't know if Anatoly saw what he claimed to see. I don't know if his father understood what he claimed to understand. I don't know if Tartaria was real, or if it was a word people used to name something they couldn't explain. But I know that in 1952, an old man believed it strongly enough to spend his last 3 days making his grandson write it down. I know that his family carried that testimony across borders and decades, preserved it without reading it, kept it safe even though they were afraid of it. And I know that right now, somewhere, there are people asking questions about old maps that show a place called Tartary spanning half of Asia, about buildings and cities around the world that seemed as sophisticated for their supposed construction dates, about foundations that go too deep, about archways that fit too perfectly, about stones that nobody can explain. Maybe they're all wrong. Maybe it's conspiracy, fantasy, the human need to believe in lost grandeur. Or maybe, 72 years ago, the last person who actually remembered died in Omsk, and before he died, he told the truth, and we're only now beginning to remember how to listen. The notebook sits on my desk. Brown leather, cracked spine, the last testimony of the last witness. I've read it 50 times. Each time, I find myself asking the same question Anatoly's grandson asked at the end. The question written in different handwriting on the final page. I don't know if any of this is true. I only know that he believed it. How many truths have we lost because we stopped believing them? How many buildings have we destroyed because we didn't want to ask what they meant? How many times have we been told the world is young and simple and explained, when underneath our streets, underneath our cities, underneath our certainties, there are foundations going down 30 meters into the earth, holding up nothing, leading nowhere, built by nobody we have names for. Anatoly died believing. His grandson preserved it. His granddaughter carried it. Her granddaughter sold it. And now you know it. What you do with that knowledge is up to you. You can dismiss it. You can explain it away. You can say it's just a story, just the confused memories of a dying man filtered through the pen of a grandson who didn't understand what he was hearing. Or you can look. You can search the archives. You can find the photographs. You can read the Soviet directives. You can ask why, if nothing was there, they needed to remove it. You can ask why, if nothing was hidden, they needed to classify it. You can ask why, if nothing was forgotten. We're all trying so hard to remember. In 1952, the last Tartarian witness spoke. He said there were buildings that hummed. He said there were columns that warmed the air. He said there were underground chambers with walls that bent light. He said there was a civilization so old we've forgotten we forgot it. And then he died, and the truth died with him. Except for the notebook, except for the photographs, except for the fragments, except for the questions, except for you, sitting here now, listening to a story about an old man dying in Omsk, wondering if any of it could possibly be true, wondering what else we've forgotten, wondering what else is still buried, waiting.